Okay, we unfortunately don't have Ken on the phone. I'm hoping he can join us soon. And equally unfortunately, I did not do my homework over the last month and publish the revised version of this online. But I did want to just walk people through for a second where we had rough consensus on this material last week. And then since it came up in the TOC meeting yesterday, also talk about potentially doing some additional work in this space and how we might allocate that out. So if you go
hey, Dan, Ken too.
Oh, hey, Ken, thanks for joining. Sorry for not getting this revised version out last month like I promised. I did want to just review my notes from last month, and we can hopefully confirm that we're on the same page about the changes that we were going to make. Actually, just give me one more second here. Okay, so I just need to find this email now of what we were talking about last time. Okay, so the changes that I am going to make as I'm renaming secure images to security, and I think that's going to be a major topic for us to come back and engage on based on the feedback from the TOC. And then the three categories that are all at the bottom of the landscape, which have been a little arbitrary in the past. So those are host management tooling, infrastructure automation, and private cloud. We said that we were just going to combine the three of those together, and it would be called automation and configuration. And it's just basically the question of how you turn a bare metal machine to make it part of a private cloud. And then we were going to add the compliance category and split out a few of the ones from security that fit in there, and also open policy agent out of service management. And then if I can just find this email, yeah, here it is, that I'm pasting into the chat window. This was the one that I talked about for last time of splitting up service management, which is our biggest and sort of most complicated ones, into RPC, load balancer, API gateway, and service mesh. And then I did want to throw out there one additional change that was a set of conversations that I had with Derek Collision from NATS. And that's the question of do we need, how we separate out NATS and what's called streaming on the landscape right now from this RPC category. And he made the proposal that we rename streaming to be streaming and messaging, and have it include everything that's in streaming now plus RPC, on the argument that the distinction between these is never clear. And if you heard the call yesterday, we would also put the new RSocket in there as well. Okay, so that's a lot of sort of areas for agenda. I would go ahead and hand this over to Ken if you want to give some feedback on any of that or propose some changes or path forward here.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. I liked how we ended that last time. I know that on the meeting yesterday, in the TLC meeting, there's some interest in us looking at, you know, a couple of different like categories like we did with serverless, or have like our own security one. The other idea was us take a couple of the CNCF projects and try to map out all of the things we put together. So I think it's, interesting, but at the same time, we can kind of look through a couple of different options, I think.
Yeah, I'm wondering if anybody else would like to comment on the TOC call yesterday, because bluntly, I don't feel like Alexis's proposal is totally clear. And so I think I might just need to give him a call and understand what he's getting at. I will point out to you that the interactive landscape right now can show you just the CNCF projects and where they fit into the landscape. And so I just pasted into the Zoom chat window a view of that. But you just choose landscape categories from the example filter and say only show me CNCF projects, and you see our 24 projects allocated across from it. But it seems like he's getting to a much more subtle or complicated thought I didn't quite get.
Yeah, I think, the simplification is something we're all in agreement with, and we'll get it there. I just don't know how, if we need to worry too much about that until we kind of get the categorization that we've been talking about kind of cleaned up,
Yeah, well, that one, and I do apologize for the delay, but I actually can get that live on the interactive landscape in the next day or so. And then we are planning to publish a new fixed landscape, static landscape next week with this. And, as these things go, we also just have a ton of new projects where I think we're up to now, we're going to have about 15 new projects since the last time we published this. Could I maybe ask Quentin if you could speak up, if you had a tweet from the call yesterday and maybe other changes you'd like to see here?
Yeah, I think I understood Alexis's motivation, and Brian Cantrell echoed some of those, which is that I think in general it's difficult to navigate this stuff. And one potential solution, and I don't think this is mandated, but one way of doing it is more in a hierarchical fashion, where each level of the hierarchy has a small number of branches. So we've got CNCF at the top. I think we can hopefully agree that there are somewhere between 5 and 7 major areas under that, and then within each of those there are yet more more specific areas. So if I just look at your category changes there, Dan, all of those kind of fit into one bigger category. RPCs, load balancers, API gateways, service meshes, they're all part of a thing. And as we grow the number of, it looks like we have a very large influx of new projects coming into the CNCF. And so as these things grow, it's going to become increasingly difficult to kind of put it all together in a logical mental model. So the sooner we sort of break it down into a hierarchy, the easier it will be to incorporate new projects into that hierarchy, rather than having what is, if I understand correctly, and I haven't been at all involved in development of what we've got up to now, so please correct me if my perception is wrong, but we've got a reasonably flat structure where we have these categories, and under each category we have projects, and those are either CNCF projects or non-CNCF projects. And I think that's just too complicated for
unfortunately that's not quite the case. If you could click on the ping that I just pasted into the chat window, Quentin, the history here is that like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, Ken originally put together this cloud native architecture document, and those 5 top level categories that you see on the left side, app definition development at the top, then orchestration management, then runtime, then provisioning, and cloud underneath, were the sort of top level categories that he created. And then on the right side, you had observability and analysis that kind of went across all of those. But all we're talking about right now is really swapping around subcategories inside of that. But I'm wondering if maybe what Alexis and Brian and perhaps you are looking for is more trying to highlight those top level categories or focus on them more.
Yeah, I mean, this certainly addresses, and like I say, I perhaps wasn't. So it looks like we have at least 2 levels of hierarchy so far.
Yes.
And
all we're talking about so far is swapping around the lower level stuff. We haven't talked about, oh, well, are these the right top level hierarchy? But and by the way, a bunch of people have come in and said, oh, well, what we need are 3 levels of hierarchy. But I've been hesitant to feel like that would make things clearer.
Yeah, I mean, it does become problematic as to how to represent that on something people can understand. But I think logically, there probably are subdivisions in some of these areas. Now, whether we want to expose those or not is perhaps a different question. But, you know, just looking at a few of them, cloud native storage, you know, there's so many of them and they're not all the same. Some of them sort of operate at different levels than others. And the same can probably be said for host management and tooling. You know, they're very definitely subcategories within there. You know,
well, it's just what we were trying to do last time, Quentin, and I mean, I'm still very open to making changes, was to take any subcategory that seemed too large, and service management in particular seemed like a sort of grab bag or kitchen utility drawer kind of subcategory, and break it into multiple subcategories. And I would love to do the same for storage, but what the 2 subcategories would be didn't jump out at me. I want to point out to you that we don't want to do open source versus closed source, because that's represented by the gray background versus transparent background.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at something more architectural than that. But storage, I mean, like the other one that jumped out was, we were talking about last time, is the database and data warehouse, which is now the biggest category. But the sort of obvious ones that came to mind, like SQL versus NoSQL, aren't actually great categories anymore, because a lot of things start fitting in both. Yeah,
I absolutely recognize the challenges, and I don't think anyone's got a very good solution to the problem. The problem is this is overwhelming, and we almost need a step-by-step way. And we have a 2-step mechanism. So you know, if you're looking for some particular technology, or you have a vague idea of where your problem space is, you zoom in on that layer, and you, what is it, 7 of them to choose from it, or 8 to choose from at the moment. And then within that, you pick a subcategory, and then you've got anywhere from 10 to 30 of these things to then go and wrap your head around. And that just seems, it seems like it's a step in the right direction, but it doesn't seem like it's yet easy to do, to understand.
Okay. I mean, I also want to make, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and if we look not too far into the future, I presume it's not inconceivable that we have 100 CNCF projects, and maybe 2 or 3 times as many non-CNCF projects as we have today. And then, this becomes even more overwhelming and even less navigable. So the question is, how do we resolve that problem?
Well, okay, but I do want to reiterate that the primary document, what we think of as the front side document, is this other ping that I just pasted in of the trail map. And so that is trying to tell the story that there's an order in which you want to consider those technologies. And we particularly want you just to think about the CNCF ones as you go through that process.
That definitely fills a good requirement there.
Okay, but I mean, on the trail map I mean, on the landscape itself, you know, at the simplest level, if we just want to get a bunch of icons off here, we could move the platforms and the at the bottom right, the Kubernetes certified service providers and the Kubernetes training partners, and make that their own sheet. My hesitation on doing that is just that these are a lot of the biggest supporters of CNCF, and so I sort of hate to kick them off when I feel like they're the ones who are actually doing a ton of work here. But I guess I felt like Alexis had some other idea that he was sort of going to be able to double click into security and get like a full landscape of that. And I guess I'm not, I mean, of course the interactive landscape has way more information on each of these projects. So it's very good for doing the follow-on research. And it also has the last few tweets, which tends to be extremely helpful. But I'm still a little unclear on what that sort of security pop-out would look like.
Off the top of my head, to answer that question, you know, security, that there's secure container runtimes, there are secure container registries, there's network security, there's authentication, authorization, etc. And each one of those has various projects focused in that area. So I guess one of the challenges we have here is that there are so many different angles that you can look at this from. You know, do you care about seeing all the container registries together, or do you care about seeing all the security related stuff together, which may incorporate secure container registries, secure networks, authentication, etc. And I don't claim to know the answer to the question. I just know there is a common request for making this stuff more navigable. And maybe and I think this is a topic Brian Cantrell brought up, is if we can just verify, just be very, very clear on what the goal is. The goal is to make consumers of the CNCF technology able to come in and understand what's going on as quickly and easily as possible. And that may require, you know, multiple views of the problem. One technology focused, one domain focused, etc. That should be the overall goal.
Okay, I mean, I
don't
feel
think
like
we've
that's the goal of the trail map. Is to say, hey, there's all these CNCF technologies. How can I understand what they do and in what order I might want to work with them? But the interactive landscape, for me, always had a different goal, which is that it's not about CNCF. It's saying, hey, there's so many projects and so many products in this space. How do they play out? And when I do decide that I want to, you know, make an investment in key management or storage or anything else, what are the options that I should be considering? And so, in other words, my aspiration for the interactive landscape was for it to be, I mean, the landscape, particularly the interactive landscape, was for it to be completist, where that was never the aspiration for CNCF or for the trail map.
Okay, my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, the trail map is a sequential guide to how to move to cloud native, and there's a proposed sequence that you tackle certain things first, and then you get on to more sophisticated things later. And I think it serves a very good purpose in that regard. But if I'm a security guy and I want to find out what CNCF and or cloud native does for security, I don't seem to have a very easy way to find that out. It's sort of on the trail map.
Okay, but how about key management? I mean, if you just go a step lower, if you just want to learn about key management,
yeah,
we have that section today. We show some open source and some proprietary, and we can pop up the CNCF-hosted ones are highlighted
Yes, and then there's another one for secure images and another one for networking.
Well, we agreed that we're going to rename secure images to security and compliance. I'm not trying to argue with you here. I mean, I'm very open to creating a security viewpoint where, you know, for a set of projects we say, oh, these are all security related, and then there's some sort of flag or something to allow you to view them in that way. I'm just trying to envision something rigorous and kind of maintainable along those lines. But I mean, it's definitely the case now that, you know, just trying to, I mean, one of the most common complaints I get from people coming to it is, oh, we shouldn't have to only be in one category. Our project, or especially our product, works in multiple categories. And,
yeah,
you know, our answer to that right now,
yeah,
is to say, yes, please pick the area where you fit best, or put yourself down under platform if you think that that's a better way of thinking about your offering. But I mean, that's a very different.
Yeah, or you take Alexis's, or your interpretation of Alexis's proposal, which I think is correct, which is you zoom into whichever area you are interested in and you find things in that area. And you may find the same things in other areas if they straddle multiple areas. But it does prevent you from putting it all on one slide. I mean, you either have to put it all on here and have things duplicated in multiple categories and subcategories, which seems untenable, or you have to have an interactive zoom in, zoom out thing where different products can be represented in multiple categories, which I think is Alexis's proposal. Does that make sense?
Hey, Chris, maybe, but you've heard Alexis at both the GB meeting and the call yesterday. Do you have more insight into what he's looking for?
I don't really know concretely what he's trying to accomplish. I know he just wants to simplify the landscape, so you could basically take like a category like security and only see those projects that are kind of associated with that. He's going for a more simple view. He just doesn't want to be presented with, here are 300 fucking things.
Okay. I mean, so in terms of
example,
how we would, go ahead.
No, I was just, you know, it's all very well to think about it in the context of one particular use case like security. But as you say, once you go into the rigor and you actually try and figure out how to build a sustainable model that you can keep over time and that serves not just the security community, but all the other ones, it becomes complicated. And that's essentially the problem that we need to try and solve.
I mean, I'm committed to whatever solution we come up with won't please everyone. So I think it's impossible to do that. So I think we just need to decide as a group, you know, an improvement based on currently what we have and just make a decision and move forward. We could bike shit on this forever, to be honest.
Yeah, but it is worth making sure that we understand what the problem is that we're trying to solve, and maybe bike shed a couple of alternative approaches to solving it, and then pick the least bad of them and drive it to an actual complete thing rather than just being an idea that hasn't been worked into a proper plan.
Okay, so I mean, I think I definitely need to circle back with Alexis on this, but just concretely, what I was trying to solve with the interactive landscape was a completist view. So what's the subcategory that fits each project best, each project or product, and organizing them based on that reference architecture that Ken put together a year and a half ago and the TUC approved. And so we moved serverless off into a different page because it seemed separable. And so we could do the same again, but the sort of concrete proposal that I'm hearing, if I am, is to say, oh, well, let's put an extra piece of metadata on it, that on each of these cards, and it could be, is it security related, or I don't know, is it observation related, or maybe something else, and then allow people to only to zoom in or to filter so that they're only seeing the items that is true for that metadata.
Yes, I think that is one of the tentative proposals, and with the assumption that each one of these tiles, items, products, projects can have multiple of those labels, and
Right.
maybe that
So,
even hierarchical. So maybe you zoom into security first, and you get all the things with label, security/star, and then once you've had a look at that, you then have more subcategories, which is key management or this or that or the next thing.
okay, well, let's agree up front that there is a single piece of metadata. Right? Let's see. Right now, there's at least two pieces of metadata associated with it. So there's category slash subset category, and you explicitly can choose on the interactive landscape to just show to either one, either the whole category or a subcategory. We also have by license for open source, and we have and you can choose by whole category to say open source or not open source, or you can choose specific licenses, and then you can categorize by organization and by headquarters location. So if I understand the proposal, it's that we add an additional label, and I think you're saying the labels are orthogonal, and one of them would be, is it security? And then for security, there potentially be sub-labels of compliance, and then you mentioned some others like authorization. We said key management was one. So I mean that specific part might fit just as well under category, but I'm wondering if there's other labels that you have in mind that might that might be truly orthogonal to category.
Not off the top of my head. I have to think about it some more. I'm pretty sure if we went through a handful of these projects, we would be able to come up with a draft list of those things.
And I think the only thing I can think of, Dan, is maybe some of the application and the CI/CD things we should put off in a separate area, because they're not. We think about what cloud native is about. They're not necessarily technologies that we're going to like bring into the CNCF in most cases, right?
I mean, on CI/CD, something like Spinnaker might come into the CNCF. So I wouldn't, or Argo would be a more sort of Kubernetes native one.
Right.
I mean, I'm not trying to decide for the TOC, but it seems like at least they could.
But I'm thinking more like that whole category, though, seems like Spinnaker has maybe like the Kubernetes version is more of a specific to a technology version, which makes sense, but the entire category maybe doesn't make sense, But we have one landscape that kind of has everything, and we have another landscape that is like the CNCF projects of how they integrate together. Views that might have a subset of all these different projects integrated together.
I didn't quite get that.
That's something I could think of that's a little bit orthogonal. Is maybe we kind of show like a pipeline, and we kind of show how all the different projects integrate together as a separate like use case. But it's just a thought of when you talk about orthogonal. That's what I mean to me. The sort of orthogonal in the landscape, and there's a way we've brought in some of the tools that don't really necessarily fit into the projects that we're working in.
Okay, so I mean, what's hard for me here is if we just come up with new categories and subcategories, that's like super easy for me to do and fix and such. But I haven't quite heard a proposal yet for a new set of labels if we call it that, that could apply to essentially all the items on the landscape right now. Taylor, do you have any viewpoint, or would you like to jump in on anything, or anyone else on the call?
I'm trying to take it all in.
That's fine. And we have, let's see, Craig Peters and Dims and Michael P. Watson. If any of you would like to step up with a viewpoint, we'd be happy to have you share it.
Hi Dan. Michael P. is Michael Payne here from JP Morgan Chase. So I'm also just listening in and understand the concerns about the complexity of the landscape. But, you know, I think that the discussion so far sort of makes sense. I agree with Quinton, though. I think that, you know, trying to understand exactly what the purpose is can help with the direction. So, but good to listen along.
Yeah. Along those lines, Michael, I mean, let me read you the phrasing from the very bottom of the static landscape, that we say this landscape is intended as a map through the previously uncharted terrain of cloud-native technologies. There are many routes to deploying a cloud-native application, with CNCF projects representing a particularly well-traveled path.
Sure.
And so, yeah, we were explicitly trying to say that there's not only one way of doing it. I mean, I think it's generally the case that most organizations will only pick one or two options from each of these. So, I mean, I think we can say aspirationally, the point of a taxonomy is that, you know, you probably don't want to run Nomad and Kubernetes and Mesos and Swarm all in the same organization. Now, you know, you can say, well, if it's a big enough organization, it probably is. But aspirationally, you'd probably like to pick one of those, or at most two, and select it and invest in that. And so, again, aspirationally, I think we had a similar thought for all of our other categories here, that, you know, you can do multiple container registries, but you probably don't want to.
Sure, no, that makes sense. Look, I think that I do find the landscape useful, and we've certainly shared it at work, and, you know, pay attention to sort of categories like the serverless one, for example. But really, it's sort of, I think it's useful at a category level for us, or for me at least, because the 30,000 foot view of everything is certainly daunting. But no, I understand the idea there, and I do think there's value in making this more inclusive than just the CNCF stuff. And, you know, of course, you can also use the filters to only see the CNCF stuff, which is another option as well.
Yeah, and maybe the solution is to have that be the default view, but it would sort of hide everything else that's there and available for it. I guess I would be curious if anybody maybe could just speak for a second about how they've used the landscape. I mean, if we say, look, the trail map is fine for what it is, we're not really interested in iterating on that right now. But the landscape itself, I mean, I'll just say it first. Obviously, this started out as a much, much smaller project. I mean, there were only like 80 logos or something on the initial version of it. And unfortunately, it's just gotten much, much more complex over time. But I've still found it immensely useful when I've been evaluating a space, or somebody just asks me, oh, what should I do here? And I needed to go investigate that, to both be able to look up a specific project and see things like its stars and its backing and tweets and then, you know, recent activity and that kind of thing, how many contributors it has, etc. but then also the other projects in its space. And so, I mean, as I think is often the case, the interactive landscape in particular was, very much the tool that I wanted to use just as I was playing around and learning this stuff and investigating it. But of course, the tool that's ideal for me is not necessarily the one that makes sense for the community. So I guess I'd love to hear other people's perspectives on how you are using it, and then related to that and to Quinton's question, just how is it falling down? I mean, besides that basic overwhelming question, how else is it not doing a good enough job?
Yeah. Hi, Dan. This is Dims. So one thing that helps me is like trying to figure out, okay, what are the different container runtimes that are there, right? And what are the options? So I am able to use the map to say that, okay, Rocket, Runway, CRIO are kind of the same, similar things, right? So it helps from that regard. But then what doesn't help is what do I use these along with, right? I can use these with Kubernetes, but not Mesos, right? So if we can, like, if I click on Rocket, for example, right? If we can highlight some of the things that Rocket works with, maybe that will be useful, I think. And I also like the tag hierarchy that Quinton was mentioning. That kind of like tells people that you can tag yourself. Each project, when people are proposing projects, they can select which set of tags that they want to apply to their own project. So it helps in like showing reduced views. So if I click on one thing, then the view shrinks to show the things that are associated with that level of the tag or something like that. So I think that's a good idea as well, I think.
Quinton, do you want to say a little bit more? Because unfortunately, I still remain a little confused about how to use tags separately from categories or labels.
Yeah, sorry, I am well aware that I was actually planning to just attend here and listen, so I kind of got pulled in.
This is what happens when you're on the steering committee and the TOC. And look, I'm totally happy to move this to the mailing list. So if you could think about it, and then I will also try and do short calls with Brian Cantrell and Alexis and get a clearer viewpoint from them on if they do have an ideal in mind. I do want to say, I don't think, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, we have everyone here and it seems like we're having a useful, productive talk. As long as everyone can tolerate my sort of unstructured rambling, I'm happy to talk a little bit more. So one idea a couple of ideas just came to mind while we were having this discussion. The first one is, I think this landscape diagram is very useful, but it's too much for people to take in, and it needs to be interactive. Then I think the interactive landscape lacks the structuring that the non-interactive one has. So, and I haven't used it extensively, but the impression I got that it kind of felt more like a database, in the sense that, I could specify a couple of filter criteria and then I would only get those things that fulfill that set of criteria. But I lose the mental structure that I have in the non-interactive landscape. So I don't know if that's true. And maybe
is it in front of you right now, Quinton, the interactive landscape?
Let me.
Are you in front of your computer?
I am,
yeah,
but I'm.
But just go to it's l.cncf.io for everyone to use. We'll just
type
that in again.
Okay, so I've got top level categories. So I've got the default view is a CNCF relation. So I've just got
right. So I do want to show that I am popping that up by default, but under example filters on the left side, please click the second one, which is landscape categories.
Yeah.
And now this exactly maps to the static landscape. But that said, you know, there's still 560 logos on here. And so it would be kind of overwhelming to get a picture of what you're looking at here without also keeping in mind the interactive landscape.
So this gives a
without also keeping in mind the static landscape.
Yeah, so I just clicked on category, and what I get is an alphabetical list, I believe, of categories. So I lose the whole...
No, it's not alphabetical. It's from the bottom up. See, it's cloud public first and then cloud private.
Oh, sorry, I've got the second thing says alphabetical, A to Z. So that's how I got...
Well, no. Do you see lower down under example filters?
Yes.
Sorry, but the cards inside of each grouping. So at the top left of the interactive landscape, you can see grouping as category, and then within that, within each category, it's sorted by alphabetical. But that's true on the interactive landscape. Sorry, that's true on the static landscape as well. That within the static landscape, we sort all the cards alphabetically.
Yeah, no, what I'm referring to is if I look at the non-static landscape, and this may be going into too much detail. So at the bottom of the stack, I have a cloud. And above that, I have provisioning, then I have runtime, orchestration, and application definition. And that's a logical structure. And when I do what I just did on the interactive landscape and I choose group by category, the categories...
No. Let me ask you, could you just do something... Yeah. Could you do something different for me, though? On the interactive landscape, just click on the Reset Filters button at the top left.
Yeah, gotcha.
And now, under below all the drop-downs, it says Example Filters.
Yeah.
And the second one is Landscape Categories.
Okay, so that's different than choosing category in the filters at the top and group.
Right.
Okay. So, you know.
So another way of saying it is that the interactive landscape, already supports two levels of hierarchy. One is what we call groupings, and then the second one is the sorting within each grouping. And now you hopefully see Cloud Public as the first option.
I do. But I do not see the same structure that I see on the non-interactive landscape. First of all, Cloud Public in the non-interactive one is at the bottom, and now it's at the top.
It just starts from the bottom.
Well, I mean, the first category I have, having clicked on landscape categories like you asked me to, the first category is Cloud Public at the top of the list.
Right.
And if I go to the non-interactive
so
landscape,
on the static,
cloud is at the bottom of the list. And within...
Exactly.
And so I've lost the cloud category, actually. I've got a Cloud Public category, and under that a Cloud Private category. And then at the same level in the hierarchy, I've got provisioning. Whereas in the non-interactive one, I have a cloud category and subcategories within that of private and public. So, I mean, these are silly little usability gripes, but this is exactly why people are finding this stuff difficult to use.
Oh, I'm very willing to change it. It's just my hesitancy on adding categories versus subcategories here is that I was worried it would be more confusing to deal with it. But I do want to just point out to you that as you scroll down, you are seeing whole categories at a time from the bottom up. And of course, it would also be easy to change it if people preferred to have it be from the top down. So we could have it start with the, app definition and development, database and data warehouse as an example to it. But the aspiration here is that this view of it does match the other one. And I mean, the thing that I use all the time is that if you go down to like provisioning key management and then you just click on that header, it's now just showing you that subcategory. And then you can do things like go to sort by stars. And the other key functionality here is that it's stateful URL. So at any point you can copy and paste this and tweet it or whatever, and folks will get the same view that you have. So I just pasted that key management sort by stars, and of course Vault is by far the highest. So I guess I think my ask of the people on the call would be to play around this a little bit more, and then throw some ideas onto the mailing list. I mean, if you feel like a 2-level visual is going to make it clear for people, I'm very open to doing that. The other option would be, that's an overwhelming way of looking at it, Michael. You really zoomed out there.
So this is like a 30% zoom on Firefox with a screenshot, and that's the default view if you could see the whole thing in one go. Looks
very easy to get started with.
Yeah. Well, and you might click landscape categories, and then it would match it more direct. Oh no, I guess if you do that, it won't all fit on one screen. But I do just want to give a quick shout out to what a big believer I am in SVGs, where we actually have high-res versions of every single one of these logos. So you can zoom out this far and it looks good, and also if you zoom in hugely, each of the logos looks nice. But no, please go ahead. I think you were going to make a more critical point.
Yeah, I also believe, I agree, the SVGs are the best way to do this. But I guess maybe the default is something to think about, because I agree with you, Dan. Like you are obviously very familiar with navigating the interactive landscape, and I sort of feel like I somewhat am as well. But I guess, defaults matter, and I just wonder, is there a different default we can select that would sort of make this more intuitive on how to navigate, or maybe we need to spell out how to navigate? I don't know, but just a thought, because obviously you wouldn't see what I'm sharing here now because it's this zoomed out view, but it is overwhelming even if it's off the screen. So I don't know whether I've got any concrete suggestions, but
no, it's fine. It's an
a different default.
Point. Yeah. Ken, would you like to add anything?
I agree.
And that's kind of what I was thinking too. If we could maybe have a default view that's, the CNCF projects and maybe some of the top stud projects out there, and get it down to like maybe 15 to 20, and then have a more definitive, have a bit of add to that view based on the different like tags, as was mentioned by Clinton earlier.
Yeah, I also like the idea of tags. Like I'm a long-time user of Pinboard and stuff like that, and I know a lot of the people on this list want to be in multiple categories, and tagging could be a way of doing that, and then allow a way to sort of view by tag. How to do that in concrete practice is a different story, but I do like the idea of multiple tags potentially to address that complaint.
Yeah, I just still a little. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Hang on, Dan. What I was going to ask you, who's presenting at the moment? Who's sharing their screen? Could somebody do the non-interactive landscape, or if not, I can do it.
Oh no, I can pull that up if you like.
Yeah.
Non-interactive, right?
Yeah, just
static, we call it.
Okay.
Coming.
It's just the link at the top. Or Lucina posted the URL in the chat.
Oh my gosh,
So
this is a great time for my browser to go to a standstill. Here we go. Static landscape.
Well, it's trying to load a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's that link.
That's what the static is.
You were going to say, Quentin?
Okay, that's the one the one that says current version there. So that seems like very useful. It is one particular structuring of these things, which is basically architectural with, you know, clouds at the bottom and applications at the top.
Right.
And I think that's very useful. So the two objections I can think of off the top of my head that I've heard are, one is there's too much stuff on there. And two, that isn't the view that I want. I want the view that says security versus this versus that versus the other thing. So one potential way around the problem that I think we have at least got some sort of common understanding of now is to make this thing slightly more interactive. And the two forms of interactivity I can imagine are, one is change the names of those big categories to suit my requirements. So my requirements are not to see a stack of architectural stuff. My requirements are to see either an industry segregation or a domain segregation like security. I'm deliberately waving my hands because I don't know what those categories are, but there are people who want to look at a different structure than this technical architecture structure. And the other one is, how do I get rid of some of the stuff on this thing that I don't care about? And maybe that is, I only want to see open source ones, or maybe I only want to see CNCF ones, or whatever, along the lines of the filters that you have on the interactive landscape. But I still want a structure with substructure. And then when I see an area on here that I like container runtimes, I want to be able to like click on it. And I want to go and find out more about container runtime stuff. And in particular, I might want to compare the products based on, I mean, they're not products, they're projects. But I might like to see, well, you know, how would I choose, how many of these do I need? Which ones are more suited to me? Maybe something like, you know, when I'm shopping on Amazon, and I can see, oh, these are the similar products, and this is how my one that I'm about to buy compares with the other ones, something like that. And that, you know, intuitively to me, I just like go and click on container runtime section, and I get that information. That seems to me like it would address most of the concerns I've heard from Michael, from Chris, from Alex, and others. And I'm not
well, let me see if I can
mandating a solution.
Turn that into something a kind of concrete solution. But then we're at the end of our call, which is that the interactive landscape is an open source project that you know, has this YAML file, and anyone can edit it and play with it, and it's generated and such. The static landscape is done by our in-house graphic designer, Alex Contini, who copies and pastes all of these images and then resizes them and puts them on a little gray background and such, and spends tons of time getting everything to fit in and having the data match. We have had the aspiration in the past of automatically generating this diagram. That obviously we have all the data for it, but it's just tricky to dynamically render this. But my contractor in Moscow, who's worked with me on this whole project, is really ready to go. And so the sort of natural follow-up here would be A, to automatically generate this version of the diagram, and then B, to bring back that filter box on the left and allow you to start filtering it by things like CNCF projects, open source, you know, Europe or China or other kinds of things, and allow you to see different perspectives on the landscape. Or it's really different filters on the landscape, but maybe we could think about different perspectives as a second step.
I think perspectives is a good way of thinking of it. Filtering is getting
I guess,
stuff and perspective structuring it. Where does it sit relative to the other stuff? Yeah.
Okay, I need more concrete proposals on the mailing list then, of at least two meaningful perspectives that are different than, and I'm not arguing with the concept in principle. I mean, I understand in principle you can always blow things inside out and such, but I'm looking for semi-practical things that people would actually want to do.
Yeah,
but people don't have to come up with it now, but I'd love to see it on the mailing list.
I'll see if I
sure.
can.
I'll try and put some thoughts on the mailing list too. I think I just switched to this view. I think this is the interactive version of the static. What I mean by that is this is just sorted by, it looks like it's alphabetical order, sorted by the categories.
I mean, technically it's grouped by category and sorted in alphabetical order.
Yeah, yes, sure. The categories, I guess the difference being that over here, as Quinton pointed out, you've got like the cloud at the bottom sort of moving up the stack to
right.
Which is not represented here, but I hear what you're saying, Dan. That would be hard to do automatically, but certainly something to think about.
Okay, I really do appreciate everybody's time on this, and you know, obviously I put a lot of time into it. I hope I'm not coming off that defensive around it, where I definitely don't feel like we're done with the project. I think it can be much better than it is today.
And I think it's great. I think something we can definitely improve upon. I just think you know, I'll definitely give some thoughts to defaults and yeah, some other improvements. But it's good. As I said, we've shared it.
Okay.
We've shared it pretty widely at JP Morgan.
Right.
Certainly with interest in the serverless stuff. So there are people looking at it within our organisation.
Great. And then just before I do let folks go, I just particularly with Ken want to confirm that you are okay, Ken, with that idea of combining together messaging and streaming. I'm open to blowing them up again in the future, but when I worked with Derek on it, we couldn't come up with a bright line rule that separated those two kinds of projects.
I'm good with that.
So as long as we understand that this next iteration will be different, but is not by any means the final version of it,
right?
We'll just keep iterating.
And then I want to Clinton and the emailing list. I think I want to work with him first to kind of come up with some subcategories and maybe some tagging examples, and then list them out for the mailing list. Great.
So I think the easiest way to think of it is I would love to have a static image that showed me X. If this would be useful for this reason, and not having to fill in every detail about it, but just once I think we have some concrete examples in mind, then hopefully the labels or the metadata that would implement it will pop out from that.
Yep, I think so.
Okay, thanks everyone for the call. So we'll do this again in a month, but hopefully we'll have much more activity on the mailing list in the meantime.
Yep, definitely. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.